This is something that I'm really not very comfortable talking about, because if I go too far into my beliefs, then I'm going to destroy my credibility as a scientist, which is fairly shaky enough as it is. Because really I don't call myself a scientist. If anybody asks me, I would say I'm a natural philosopher. That used to be the old term for scientist. Well, Dieter has asked me to talk about this area of religion and communication with the higher forces. And I must start by saying that I completely disagree with everything that she said. So if you think that I subscribe to any of that stuff that Dieter said, then please disabuse yourself of that, okay? There are various problems with it. The House of the Father is the main one that I have. Because any study of religion that takes you right back to the earliest history of religion will show that in fact primitive people did not believe in a single god. They believed in demons and they believed in many gods, and they would have gods of streams and gods of trees, gods of fertility, gods of women how they felt in the afternoon, and gods of women how they felt in the morning. And to my mind that seems quite a reasonable approach if you're going to look at God, if you're going to have any sort of connection with spirits. And the other thing that I disagree with is meditation. Because to my mind meditation is something that takes you away from reality and not brings you into reality. Most of the anthropologists will say that people are people amongst people. And if you disconnect yourself from people and you go and sit somewhere by a tree or in the middle of nowhere and you just go inside your mind and try and strip away all of the aspects of life that make it worth living and try and find some essential inner core, all you will find is nothing. You'll find nothing. And you will make yourself very angry in the process. So I don't think that this idea of meditation being a connection with the higher force, if there is a higher force, or a lower force, or a sideways force, is, I think it's, not only is it not valuable, it was actually counterproductive. And most of the people that I know that do meditation are people who are very angry, and they build up huge levels of anger inside themselves, which they manifest in various spiteful ways. So to my mind, the way to live your life is to live it as fully as possible and as strongly as possible, and throw yourself into all sorts of energies and into all sorts of activities and connect with people and discuss things with people and so forth. And that way you will fill up your system with wisdom. And the other problem with that kind of approach to religion is that the idea of connecting with the higher force, if we like to see it like that, suggests to me that you're expecting the higher force to do something. So it's a sort of childish, sort of father-children approach to life, where you kind of see somehow that the whole world is controlled by this God that created the world, and this God is somehow a divine being that has some, like overarching sort of interest in the human race, like a father has an overarching interest in his children. And so what you want to do there is, just in this model, is you would say, please Daddy, my sister has just taken away my toy. Will you please, punch her or lock her up or bring it back to me or something like that. It's rescinding your ability to change things yourself. See, the Jehovah's Witnesses do this. The Jehovah's Witnesses, when I was in the Green Party and we used to try and go around canvassing and trying to change people's minds and saying, well, hey, there's going to be a nuclear war, you've got to do this, you've got to do that. They said, no, we can't do this, because our religion tells us that God is in charge. Jehovah will sort everything out. And if we try to sort something out, it's like saying to Jehovah, look, we don't really think you're in charge because we're going to do it all. So that's another problem with the idea of this communication with this supreme being, this spirit that created us and so forth. And now it may be looking to you that I don't believe that I'm a total rationalist, and as a scientist I don't believe that there are such things as spirits or gods or demons or a supreme being or anything. But that's not true. That's not true, because I want to go back to the concept of science. So, the word science derives from the Latin, from scientia. Scientia is Latin for truth. Truth. So science is taken to be truth. You know, and often you'll see on the television some guy will come in, some scientist, very often from the nuclear industry, and he will say, it's been scientifically proven that these low levels of radiation cannot harm your health. What he says is that I'm right, because I'm saying science. I'm using this magical word science. I'm a scientist, this is a scientific truth. But I have a problem with science and truth, because the other question that I ask with Pontius Pilate is, what is truth? According to the Bible of New Testament, when Jesus came before Pilate and he was going to be, he was being arraigned before Pilate by the Jews, you know, for all sorts of criminal acts and so forth. Pilate asked him, you know, why he was there, and he said, well, I'm here to bear witness to the truth. My Father in heaven has sent me to bear witness to the truth. And Pilate, very, very intelligently, I think, said, well, what is truth? And I would have said the same thing. I would have said the same thing. What is truth? How do we know if something is true or not? Now, science, of course, will, as developed from the earliest manifestation of it, if you like, Francis Bacon, Queen Elizabeth I, science, what science does is it essentially holds up truth to be that which can be empirically shown to be to be the case. So in other words, you do experiments. Science is an experimental art. So if you want to know whether something is the case, you do an experiment which shows whether it is true or not. But science doesn't deal with these areas of magic and these areas of religion. Science has little to say about it, except that they don't exist. The most well-known proponent, of course, of the destruction of God, if you like to call it that, is the philosopher David Hume, because he asked the simple question, which is the question that Ditto asked, of course, when she talked about the Muslims and the Christians, when you talk about the Crusades, you are saying, here is a whole load of people that believe in Allah, and they pray to Allah, and Allah is the person who is the creator of the universe and the creator of the world, and he is, as far as they're concerned, the higher force. And on the other hand, you have all these crusaders, you have all these people under Philip of France, these people under Richard the Lionheart, and various other crusaders who want to destroy the Muslims. They say God has given us this message that we must march to Jerusalem and we must destroy these infidels, kill them all, cut their heads off and take Jerusalem back. And of course, thousands of people died, lots of people died, everybody cut everybody else up and so forth, and they both believed in the Supreme Being. Now, is it the same Supreme Being? Is there a Supreme Being? Did the Supreme Being sit up there and think, oh, what's going on here then? Well, that's a bit of fun, isn't it? Well, or did he think, oh, this is awful, what could I do about it? But I mean, the point is, what can he do about it? He's a Supreme Being, he could have done what he liked, couldn't he? He could have done what in the Greek religions, where they had lots of different gods, he could have said, right, okay, we're going to stop these people from doing that because we're going to send some plague, or we're going to stop these people by sending some plague, or we can actually manifest. We can, like in Star Trek, we can come down on Earth and we can say, you must stop this. And if you don't, I will turn you into a pillar of salt. All these things were possible to God, but none of this happened, you see. None of this happened. It didn't happen, did it? So the obvious question that David Hume asked is why? Because if there is a Supreme Being, then how is it that all these terrible things can happen? What's going on? All right, Ditter's answer is it's an experiment to make our souls somehow improved. But how can it be an experiment to make our souls improve to kill a little girl at Sellafield because she happened to inhale some plutonium from the beach? What about her soul? She was just born. She hasn't done anything wrong. There's no harm there. Of course, the Catholics would say this little girl had original sin. But then you would say, well, Jesus came down and hung on the cross in order to save everybody from their original sin. Because I have to say, ultimately, with David Hume, we cannot believe in a single creator, divine spirit. This doesn't work. And even if there were one, it does seem that he's either flown away somewhere else, or she has, or else they really don't care what's going on. They set the machine up, they wound the clock up and walked away. So there's really no point in dealing with that. And so perhaps there is nothing. Perhaps we are just some accident of fate. We just turned up here like some experimental kind of mistake that occurred in a universe, and this was all sort of molecular accidents. This is the position of Richard Dawkins. Now, I'm not going to go along with Richard Dawkins either, because Dawkins professes to be a scientist, and of course a scientist has to observe things, has to see what's happening out there. You know, you have to do the experiments and you have to make observations. And anybody can make observations that show that something's going on which is not rational. And so this is where I now sort of part with the scientists. Because I'm almost 70, and in my life I've seen enough to know that there are things beyond the obvious. There are kind of forces beyond the obvious. And the easiest way to interpret these forces beyond the obvious as would be in the same way as primitive tribesmen do. Most primitive religions do. Most people in small tribes in Africa do. And that is to say that there are many, many gods and many, many forces. And the best description of all of these gods and forces is to describe them as demons. Now, I'm not even saying that I believe that either, but what I don't believe is that that isn't the case. This is. You see, as a scientist, I observe things, and I observe over my life lots of events which are impossible to explain. And other people have too. I mean, you have too. You people that are listening to me will have observed things that are impossible to explain in your lives, and in the events that occur to you, and in what's been told you by other people when you're sitting and talking about these things. You will find that there are things which cannot be explained in terms of scientific, rational structures, analyses. And so something's going on behind the scenes. And that really is most easily interpretable as far as we're concerned when we're talking about nuclear war and the possibility of nuclear war in terms of good and evil. Now Nietzsche wrote a book, Beyond Good and Evil, which was a sort of rationalist platform, I think. But going back, I would like to go back to before good and evil. So let's walk behind Nietzsche now. There are many, many stories for children and for adults along the lines of the Lord of the Ring, where the things that happen in the world are described in terms of evil and good. So bad forces and good forces. And in all of these stories, there's some kind of force behind the system which is trying to push it in a certain direction. And there's another force behind the system which is trying to push it in the opposite direction. And these are the two opposing forces of good and evil, which are interpreted in all religions, of course, in terms of the God and the devil, in the Christian religion anyway. I was asked some years ago to give a talk about nuclear and evil by the Royal Society of Arts in London. So I went all the way down to London and I talked, and I gave a little talk about on the subject of is nuclear evil. And I think I was expected to say, oh well, you know, we can't talk in terms of good and evil because we're scientists, and you know, these sort of terms don't exist, and everybody has evil and good inside each one of us, and all of this stuff, this conventional wisdom. But in fact, I took the view, and I take the view, that certain things are evil, and that we can use this term. And this evil, I think, either it exists outside of the reality that we understand as some sort of demonic system, but it doesn't have to. It could actually exist inside the system as a sort of monstrous construction of the way in which people interact with each other. But either way, I think this is a valuable way of looking at the situation, is to consider that nuclear and all of this nuclear war structures and so on are in some sense evil. And if that's the case, then the people that promulgate them are evil too. And in fact, in some cases, you can quite clearly say they are evil. If you take, for instance, a good example would be George W. Bush or Donald Rumsfeld. These, I really, or Margaret Thatcher. I mean, I believe these people can certainly be labelled as evil. And of course you can label some people as good. Although, you know, it's a sort of grey area. So let's go back to communicating with the higher forces. How do we do it? Well, I think my answer to this is that if there was not some way of communicating with some power or some magical structure that enabled people to achieve things that otherwise they wouldn't have achieved, if that was impossible, then I don't think religions would have developed. I don't believe in the conventional explanation of the development of religion. So I think there is some way, and I have in fact myself seen in Africa people conduct rituals, if you like, or actions which can only be described as magical. So there must be some way of interacting with the unseen world. And scientifically I can say that that's so too, because in science what you have to do is you have to look at what actually is and not on what you think should be. And there are many, many examples of things which just cannot be explained, and that could only be explained through what we might now call magic. The best scientist, if you like, who is in this area is a chap called Rupert Sheldrake, Englishman, who has pointed out that science just does not absorb into its system of description a whole range of observed phenomena which it cannot understand. So these phenomena are there, they're real phenomena. I mean, I'll give you one example, and this is Sheldrake's best example, is the way in which animals can sense when their owners are coming home. And Sheldrake has done an enormous number of experiments with video cameras, where you have a dog in a room or a cat, and the video camera has got a time sequencer on there, so it tells you what the time is, and the dog sitting on the floor, and there's another video camera at the office of the person who is the master or mistress of that dog, and then at some point the mistress or the master decides to come home, so they get up and they get their handbag and they pick it up, and the video camera is showing this, and you can see the time. And the minute that time occurs, the exact second that time occurs on the video camera watching the master of the dog gets up, wags its tail, and it runs to the door and starts to sit there waiting for its master. Now this is not possible to explain within the structure of science. It's just one example. Sheldrake has tried to develop a number of other experiments which show similar sorts of phenomena. Now if those phenomena are real, and they quite clearly are real, then there is something going on outside the structure of what we consider to be what we think is true, science, truth. Something is going on behind the scenes. And if something is going on behind the scenes, it may be possible to communicate with it in some way and create some kind of magical effect. So all I want to do is open up this discussion to the people who are watching and say to them, think along these lines. It's not the way to change the world may not be what you think. It may not be simply just voting in elections or writing letters to people or doing scientific experiments. There may be something else as well. There may be something else. And don't exclude that from your methodology. And that's probably destroyed my credibility, but anyway, there it is. Thank you for listening.
I would like to ask you to cover that little piece where you knew exactly about the fact that they are telling in the churches in Latvia that Satan rules in this territory. That there was some historical reference you had to this.
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, I can tell you that the Christian religion, because I was brought up as a Catholic and I know a bit about the Christian religion, certainly doesn't believe that Satan is the Lord of the world. That was a heresy that was developed around about the time of about 200-300 years after Christ was I think it's called the Manichaean heresy.
What is heresy?
Heresy. Oh, well, heresy is something that disagrees with the normal structure of a belief system. Okay, so belief system says, you know, Jesus was born and he was the Son of God, and then he was crucified on the cross, and this and that happened, and this was why it happened, and so forth. And a heresy would be like to say, no, he was actually just a man. He wasn't Son of God. He was on the cross, but he was a really good guy, you know, and he had lots of very good. So that's a heresy. It's where somebody says, I don't agree with that interpretation of the events. I think that actually it's like this. And the church defines what it is you have to believe in. So you have what's called a doctrine. You know, there's a doctrinal system which you have to adhere to. And if you don't adhere to, and you start to say, well, no, that isn't true. Martin Luther, good example. So he came along to the Catholic doctrine and he said, I can't believe in this. This is just not. This is nonsense. You know, how can ordinary people forgive sins? You know, if somebody does something wrong, you know, you can't just forgive it and then they walk away. That's not right. But then that was considered to be a heresy, you see, because it disagreed with what the church taught. The church taught that you can, if you're a priest, you can forgive sins. You can do all sorts of other things. So that's what a heresy is. Anyway, this particular heresy was that actually the world is not it's not the place where God decides on what's going on. It was somehow given to Satan, and he decides on what's going on. And God, and in this heresy, God sort of sits back and watches Satan do whatever he does. You know, and I'm not quite sure because I don't know enough about the heresy, but I can't personally see why God would go to such lengths as to give the world to Satan to have a lot of fun with. And what would he be doing meanwhile? I mean, watching YouTube? I mean, I don't know. It seems that this entire area of Catholic Christian dogma seems to me to be some of the most insane nonsense that I've ever heard in my entire life, and any child would tell you that. But then, of course, as who was it? Not Schopenhauer. One of those famous philosophers, the Dutch, not the Danish one. Can't remember his name now. But he said, the madder a belief, the stronger you believe it. I think that's true.
Yeah.
True, you know.
The bigger the lie, the more people believe it.
Well, the more insane it is, really. The more crazy the belief is, the more people, because they don't have to believe in it. They have to have much more strength to believe in it. You see, Kierkegaard, that was it. Søren Kierkegaard. Søren Kierkegaard wrote a very good book about Abraham. See, now there's a very good example of a belief which is insane. I mean, here you have one of the basic stories of the Christian church is Abraham. So this is like the father of the church. And what does he do? He goes and slaughters his son. He goes up a mountain to kill his own son. Right? Why? Because God said you must do that. Okay. Now, just like Bob Dylan said, you know, he said you must, like in Highway 61 Revisited, Dylan says, Abe said, God, you must be putting me on. And God said no. And Abe said, where shall this deed be done? And God said, out on Highway 61. I mean, how can anybody be considered to be the father of the church and some kind of enormous hero if he went to kill his son? I mean, in any society he would be a murderer. He would be a murderer, or more than a murderer, killing his son. Not just killing some guy off the streets. You know, God said, no, don't kill some old bum off the streets. You've got to kill your son. Isaac, there he is. Off you go, up the mountain, Abe, and he gets his little fucking knife, and off he goes up the mountain, bringing his son, and the son saying, where are we going, Dad? Oh, we're just going up the mountain, I'm going to kill you. I mean, what is this? You know? And this is the religion? Forget it.
Yeah, exactly. It's pure Satanism, though. Cannibalism.
I don't know. I have a lot of time for Satan myself. Poor Buck. He's had bad press, I think.
But still, what was the year of that?
I think it was about 300 AD.
This is Abram, yeah?
No. This is Manichaean heresy. Abraham's in the Bible.
Yeah, okay.
Abraham's Old Testament.
Manichaean heresy. What happened with that heresy?
They killed them all. That's what happened.
Tell this story, because you went around, it was impossible to understand. So there was a heresy.
Yeah, and then the people who had that heresy were all killed.
But somehow it has now spread into all
No,
churches.
I don't believe it has. I think you must...
In Latvia they have.
Right, in that case I'm very surprised if that's what the case is in Latvia. This is a Lutheran church here. This is not a Catholic church. So I don't know what the Lutherans do. I mean, you know, who knows what they do. I don't know anything about Lutheran religion.
But they still believe in Jesus and his resurrection. And there is no scientific proof of that.
Of course there isn't. No. I mean, it's all bunk.
And
Okay.
if you go and communicate to somebody who is not a God, you are just wasting your time.
There was one other thing I wanted to say, which I didn't.
Aren't
say.
you wasting your time communicating with Jesus, who is not God?
To my mind, religion is the only sensible thing that was said by those early churchmen was that if there is such a thing as a higher force or power, then it is within you. It's not out there. So it's no good saying, Jesus help me. You've got to say, Jesus help me in here. And it doesn't matter if it's Jesus or Jesus, you know. It's something that you create yourself in some way. It's something that you create yourself. Anyway, I did want to say something about Dawkins. And that was this. This is to go back to the philosopher Bishop Berkeley, who said that we have no way of knowing whether any of this is real. No way of knowing whether any of this is real. This could all be like the Matrix. I mean, Bishop Berkeley didn't know about the Matrix, but we know about the Matrix. In other words, it could all be a construction. And that's what I say to Dawkins, see? I mean, Dawkins may have all his clever theories about how evolution works in this way or that way, and science works in this way or that way, but actually he cannot know that. That's my point. He cannot know it. That dogmatism is misplaced. Dawkins has misplaced dogmatism. Dawkins has made evolution into evolution and science. Dawkins has made it into a religion himself. So he himself has created his own religion, which is sort of Dawkinsian science. And we cannot know that this world that we see, however beautiful it is and however complicated it is not just a construction, and that we're not just creatures inside a computer program that's being run in the mind of some machine. We can't know that. And in fact, not only can we not know that, but there's plenty of evidence that it might be true, associated with quantum theory. Because quantum explanations are impossible to deal with unless you take the view that the quantization is not of energy, it's of time. And if you have quantization of time, it means that you have some sort of clock speed. It means that things cannot occur in a fraction of the clock speed shorter than the quantum, which is a very small period of time, but it's still a pixel, it's still an instant, just like in a computer program. And that is probably, to my mind, that's the best explanation of quantum theory, is that energy is not energy that's quantized, it's time that's quantized. Time is not continuous. Time goes like a clock, tick, 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 tick. And each time you get a tick, you get a new state of the universe. Just like when you press the key P on your keyboard, that's communicated in one instant of the clock speed, then it goes through the whole RAM system. Okay, there we are.
Oh, but then what about I Ching? I Ching and Chinese, they are quite wise, aren't they?
Well, you could argue that the I Ching, which is the earliest book on Earth, has some kind of relationship with the quantized expression of reality. You could do that. You see, because then if you're going to talk about demons and higher forces or sideways forces or under forces or any of these spiritual systems, you could actually see them in terms of subroutines in the program, in this matrix program. Just in fact as the Matrix did, because there was that oracle, if you remember, that black woman, you know, and they said she's a subroutine. Okay. Now subroutines can emerge out of complex computer systems. They can just emerge. Their unanticipated emergence has been shown in a number of programs. I mean, if you write a big computer program, sometimes you get what's called a bug, because in fact, you know, you didn't realise that two of these units could kind of communicate with other and create a third unit that was more important than the two units that you started with. And that can create a sort of a monster, if you like, or a sort of machine inside a machine.
But that I Ching is not so many monsters there. It's very sort of philosophically ethical.
Well, of course, and many people will tell you that it works. And many people that have studied the I Ching, and people that also use the tarot card for divination, they have lots of evidence of success at predicting things or at advising people on what to do and so forth. This is all an extremely complicated, chaotic grey area. All I say about it is that it's valuable to try and sort of believe and not believe at the same time. It's not valuable, it does not further to, as the I Ching would say, it does not further one to dismiss all of this stuff as rubbish. No blame. Thank you very much for talking.
Yeah, thank you so much. This was great.
That's all the time you destroyed my credibility for all time.
Don't worry. The reality, the reality is much more important to find the grid of reality
maybe.
than the shallow credibility.
Yes, I agree. And also the other thing about it is that science is so boring.
Exactly.
You know, I mean, if the whole world was just the scientific description, it would be so boring one would just want to kind of cut one's throat or something.
And we just sort of, this week, we made these understandings that the whole network of systemic rulers are quite criminal. So why would we care? So we are looking really for the answers. And what I found very fabulous with I Ching is really that it is very fatherly, very motherly. It is sort of giving you nice advice that are really up to point on your question, and which really sort of makes me feel that there is some sense in the matrix situation. And that is exactly why I have started using I Ching, and it is soothing, because sometimes you really get stressed about big issues, and you, once in a quarter I put some question to I Ching, maybe once in a half a year, and it is it's so exquisitely perfect. It's as it would really know what and every time it's different, and it's really right, and it makes me believe that this is somehow matrixical.
The science fiction writer Philip K. Dick believed entirely in the I Ching and lived his life by it, but then he killed himself, right? So
yeah, definitely. But look, who was the translator of I Ching?
what?
It was Jung.
Yeah.
Carl.
Yeah, but Jung was another nutcase like me, you know.
But Carl Jung, he believed in it, obviously, because he put this great effort even to translate it from Chinese into English. What a project. And what about dices?
Yeah, well, that's right. Well, that's me. I'm dice man.
Yeah, show your dice.
If I were to make a decision, I usually make my decision with a pair of dice.
And that's obviously sort of, you do trust this matrix thing.
No, it's not that. It's more than that. It's kind of more that I recognise that logical analysis doesn't work. So you may as well use random.
But it does work, really.
Only on very simple things. As soon as it gets more complicated than, like, you know, dropping an apple on the ground, it's a lot easier to just decide to use the dice.
I don't use dice. I don't find them useful for me.
No.
But I do find useful I Ching, and what I think is that I Ching would be worth translating into every language to develop
It has been translated into every language.
communication with a higher source.
Well, that's one way forward, I suppose, yeah, to communicate
direct communication. You have a question, you sort of put it in front of Aching, and it gives you a reasonable philosophical and ethical
Well,
answer.
we could try an experiment, actually. Here's an interesting experiment.
Well, we don't have Aching.
No, we don't have to do this, but we could get these people to get the I Ching, right, all of you, and we could ask you all to do the I Ching and ask the same question, say, how are we going to stop nuclear war? Okay? Would the Oracle advise us on how we should go about stopping nuclear war? Let's see if you all get the same answer. That would be something, wouldn't it? Old Sheldrake would like that.
Huh. Okay. So if you do that, then you will have to write to us, and we will see what answers we'll get. Because very interestingly, I Ching has 64 numbers in it, like in computer system, and you can write what numbers you get. Nevertheless, we will go and create a ritual out in the beautiful surroundings of the Baltic Sea, on the shore of white sand that is radioactive. But we will pray, and we will sing, and we will full-heartedly believe that we will be able to criminalize nuclear war systems and to create a fabulous, loving and understanding society. Because we are divine beings, we are in power, and we will make a difference. So thank you for being with us in this conference. Thank you so much for taking your time, and only together we will succeed.